Welcome to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. This is Victor. We're going to do our second podcast. We got like 600 episodes and 2 of them are podcasts where we just talk about a variety of topics. And we're going to talk about things like, we're not going to talk about like, say, the downing of the plane with the soldier and the rescue, because everybody's covering that. So we're going to try to cover things that people aren't covering as much, or things that people are covering and we got unique insight into it. Okay. So we're just going to go bounce around to a bunch of stories. Now, I had this all set up, all researched, but then a story broke. It's so important, I believe, that it goes to the top.
Okay.
And I just haven't seen anybody covering it. So basically, if you look below, you're going to see references, and they're going to be numbered. And I'm just going to, so there's reference number 1 below. Okay. And basically, look at Russia sends 6 submarines to the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay.
So they've sent 2 nuclear and 4 non-nuclear, right? And you can read the article, but basically, what they're doing is they're trying to protect Iran's interests, right? And so, like, they want to prevent U.S. land invasion, and they want to make sure that nobody can come through the Strait of Hormuz that their ally Iran doesn't want to come through.
Oh,
because like the Chinese vessels are coming through, and everybody who comes through has to pay $2 million extra toll to them.
Okay.
And then, of course, the U.S. and our allies, we just can't come through. So I just think it's a huge story.
Yeah, definitely.
Because, there's so many videos on the internet, and they're all true, about how difficult it is to get force ships through the Strait of Hormuz. It's a very narrow waterway, but it's even more narrow because there's only 2 different 3-kilometer wide places where you can pass.
Oh.
So even though it looks like it's like 40 kilometers wide, you can't, because the big boats, they have to go there. And so there's basically an in and an out, path, like of roads. And so, it's right there next to the Iranian coast. And it's like, everybody's like, man, it's impossible to protect those boats. It is impossible because, they're not defended.
Right.
And destroyers are made for self-defense. Our destroyers, not to defend other ships, And now just put 6 submarines in there,
Right.
And if you think about this, this is actually blowback from terrible U.S. foreign policy. Because look, I'm not even talking about Russia, Ukraine,
Okay.
They're doing their thing. I'm not making a judgment of that. Ukraine is basically our proxy and Europe's proxy, But whatever, forget that. Just think about Syria, right? Because you remember Russia had an interest in Syria because they had a couple ports there. And so they were pro-Assad. And then when the rebels fought before the Russo-Ukrainian war, they sent in the Russian Air Force to defeat the rebels. Now they're in this war with Ukraine, and they can't do that, so because they're busy.
Yeah.
And so now we back the rebels, and Israel, of course, and Turkey, honestly, and back the rebels, and they overthrow Assad so that we can put the Al Qaeda guy in, Abu al-Julani, and so we installed an Al Qaeda government to get rid of Bashar al-Assad, and they lose their bases. So then they're just like, oh, we're just going to screw the United States. Because even the tankers that are getting through with Iran's consent have to denominate the payments in yuan, Chinese yuan. So they're undermining the petrodollar.
Okay.
And so this is just a huge story because it just makes it even more impossible to open the strait.
But it's almost like an escalation because
it is,
because it's a direct threat to U.S. forces,
right,
by Russia instead of the proxies.
Right. Yeah, it is an escalation. And so, like, what we found out about Trump is that he falls for the escalation trap every time.
Oh.
So like in the 12-day war, we came in towards the end and we dropped 6 bombs, big, huge bunker busters on, Fordo and the other base and the other nuclear sites. But they de-escalated, Iran did, by shooting 6 missiles at one of our bases, giving us advance warning through Turkey that they were coming, and we shot them all down. And they're like, ha, we shot back at you. You know what I mean? But they really were de-escalating. Now, Iran's not de-escalating at all.
Mm.
They won't negotiate with them. They just want to do this more and more. And so Trump has to be the one to step back. Or Netanyahu, which is not going to happen.
Never going to happen.
Right. And so the problem here is, you could say, oh, Jack, we could sink those 6 submarines. You could. You probably could. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You may take naval casualties. You may not. But like, if we start attacking those submarines, there's no reason why they can't launch ICBMs at our Navy.
Right.
Because it's just military target out in the ocean. We've talked about this before. They could be nuclear, non-nuclear. They could be MIRV, non-MIRV. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And the escalation trap there is huge.
Right, definitely.
And so really, if the escalation trap's that big, if Trump can stay out of it, then they just can't open the Strait of Hormuz. We
right.
cannot. you know? And so that's where we're at with that.
Okay.
So now I want to shift to another story. Okay, so I did an episode after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, maybe a couple weeks afterwards. I'll put it in links below if you want to see it. And people had responded in the comments, and I just brought out a bunch of different things that are wrong with the narrative of him dying. You know, just all the suspicious stuff that I found suspicious. And in the comments, people were kind of like, man, this is not a good look. You know, you shouldn't be doing this. It aged like fine wine.
Did it?
Yeah. You know, you never know when you do it, you know. You make predictions
Yeah.
or whatever, you know, or, you know, but it just, I stand by everything in that episode.
Wow.
7 months later, you know. And so let's look at this news story that came out. It says, Charlie Kirk murder bombshell. Bullet does not match rifle used by suspected killer Tyler
surprising.
Robinson. New court filing claims. Okay. So basically the ATF was, you can look at this. I'm not really going to read from the article, but you could look at it. But this is the second reference below. But the ATF, it's a state case. You know, the state's trying him. And the ATF did an analysis of the bullet compared to the other bullets, you know. And they... Okay, so if you're a Republican or you're Fox News, you know, like you're like MAGA guy, you're gonna be like, oh no, it didn't disprove that he killed him. It's just inconclusive.
Oh.
But it's like if you have like say 20 fingerprints on a computer, you know, and then you have my fingerprints and you search all 20 of those and you're like, it's inconclusive. Well, that means they're not my fingerprints.
Right.
Because, you know.
Yeah.
Anyways, Candace Owens has a story. I couldn't verify this, but her story is that they're using a test to test the lead in the bullet to see if it matches the lead in the other bullets.
Oh, wow.
Which doesn't really prove anything, because if they made a batch of 50,000 bullets, that just means that they're both from the same batch. My neighbor could have 2 boxes from that batch. It doesn't pin it down to that one thing.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And so basically it was discontinued in 2005, that method.
But weren't there other bullets in the rifle?
There were, right.
Well, I mean, if you compare those two, chances are very high that they came from the same box.
Right, but it's not definitive though. I mean, it doesn't prove it. So, and they've convicted like 2,500 people using this method. So those people are getting out now.
Oh, wow.
Well, they got out a long time ago because in 2005, that's her claim. I couldn't verify that you used that test, you know? But now they've sent it to the FBI for further analysis.
Okay.
Right?
So the height of honesty and morality, so that'll be good.
Yeah. And one of the lessons to learn here is that, so when you first get arrested, you know, like, you automatically get a speedy trial constitutionally, which is like 60, 90 days. They got to take you to trial. I forget which one, you know, you have to voluntarily waive that right in order to extend it.
Okay.
Nobody else has a say except for you, the one who's arrested, you know, should have went with the speedy trial. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It would have forced them to do all this stuff. Anyways, okay. I got another Charlie Kirk story that I came across, right? And this one's really good, okay? So, third reference below, Axios. Former Trump campaign manager registers to advocate for Israel, okay? Now, the guy's name is Brad Parscale, okay? And he was top 8 on President Trump's first 2 campaigns, and he was the campaign manager of the first campaign, okay? And he registered as a foreign agent, okay?
Is he a citizen here?
Yes.
Okay.
So the article doesn't get my point, right? Because they're just saying, oh, Trump bad because, you know, a guy who used to work for him is registered as a foreign agent. What do you think? It's not really like he's hiding Miriam Adelson. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's not really a burn on him. But let's take this to Charlie Kirk, okay? This guy works for Salem Podcast Network, which is this conservative podcast network that has just a bunch of shows under them, including the Charlie Kirk show.
Oh.
This guy is the chief strategist for them. And he registered as a foreign agent on September 18, 2025. That's 8 days after Charlie Kirk was assassinated.
Oh, wow.
He registered as a foreign agent. Now, he registers as a foreign agent. You got to specifically put the company, you know, that you're working. And he's not working as a foreign agent for the Salem Podcast Network. He's doing it for this Watchtower, you know, which you can see in the article. But I had said after he died, I had said, look, so it was like the 4th stop on that tour, you know, and he only made it like 15, 20 minutes into the Q&A. So I went back to his channel and I watched all 3 of the Q&As from the
previous.
Yeah, just to see like, was he changing what he was saying, this and that. And they were all about an hour and a half long. And I said this on a previous video. Look, there was not one question about Israel in those. And somebody would come up and they would say, look, I agree with you on everything. It's just one thing on your foreign policy. And he'd be like, Israel, go ahead, and they'd be like, no, it's economics, this and that, or something like that. And he'd be like, okay, a new argument. And then there was a Jewish guy who had said 40 to 50% of the questions that he was asked were about Israel, right?
Okay.
And I told people on my show, and I said, look, they're editing out all, if you want to know which way Turning Point's going, they're editing out all questions about Israel, and no wonder. The chief strategist for their podcast is registered as a foreign agent 8 days after he died.
Wow.
Now people are also tying this into Israel did it type thing. I don't necessarily say that.
Okay.
But I think it's an important story.
Yeah.
And I just don't see a lot of people covering it. So
interesting.
Okay, let's go back to Iran now. Okay, because originally I didn't have Iran in the first part. Now, let me tell you what happened when the war first started. Okay, so Israel decided to strike them on a specific day at a specific time, and then remember Marco Rubio and Trump said, "Yeah, we had to go to war because Israel was already going to the war, and they were going to strike our forces, so we had to minimize our losses by doing that." Okay, which means Israel dragged us into the war.
Yeah,
and it's like, man, on that first strike, they got like the Ayatollah and all of the mullahs, And so, okay, well, so we know that that's a thing that happened, okay? And this is a prediction I'm making, okay? I don't have proof of this. I'm going to make a prediction right now. So, it's during Ramadan, one of the holiest times of the year for Muslims, okay? And if we just take the word Ayatollah and let's just say Pope with a wife, okay?
Yeah.
So, it's the spiritual leader, right? And then instead of saying mullahs, let's just say like bishops. Okay? So imagine this scenario. The bishop... The Pope is going to meet with all the bishops during Ramadan, and they're all going to bring their wives and children. What does that sound like to you? What kind of meeting do you think they're having? It's a Security Council meeting. They were having a Security Council meeting. Here's the article. Reference 4 below is a Security Council meeting, and they brought their wives and kids to it. What do you think? What does it sound like?
Well, it's just a religious.
It sounds like
ceremony.
They're going to church.
Yeah,
that's what it sounds like to me. So I don't know this for sure, but basically, you've got. The Pope's wife died. He brought his son. His son is now the Pope, His son's wife died. His grandchild died. The Ayatollahs, Why were they all at a security meeting?
Are the Pope and the bishops, are they also all the political leaders?
Yeah, so the kind of they're split in half because they also have a president and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
And they also have a parliament.
Gotcha.
And so there's the religious side because it's fundamentally a religious government, a theocracy. But there is a division, and then the military is somewhere,
straddling both.
Yeah, by both. And the IRGC is more by the political wing than the regular military, which would be more on the other side. Anyways, this is just my prediction.
Okay.
And the interesting thing about it is because if I'm correct, then that's a scummy thing to do.
But what, you're predicting that it's going to come out at some point?
It was a religious meeting in Ramadan. And they just didn't care if they got blown up because they would just all be martyrs.
Okay.
And they already had their second and tertiary, command structures. And it's like, if you attack a Muslim country on Ramadan and you don't have some imminent reason for doing it, like they're going to have a nuke in 2 days, you're a scumbag.
Yeah, 100%.
It's the same thing as that Baruch guy who, remember, he went into Al-Aqsa Mosque and just gunned down all the Muslims on their knees. It's like on their knees, they're praying.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? It's a scummy thing to do. Like if two Muslim countries are fighting each other at war, they can just take Ramadan off and then resume the war because they can't eat during the day. They can only eat before the sun comes up and after the sun goes down. And so it's just really a scummy thing. And if it's Ramadan during church, I'm against it. And if it comes out like 6 months from now that this is the case, nobody will care.
Nobody will care.
Because of all the list of atrocities. The 160 girls at the 8-year-olds,
Right.
And it's like, I just wanted to point this out because I think it's kind of legit.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay, so now I want to go to this video, okay?
Okay.
And so I'm going to play the sound for it for it's 2 minutes long, for the first 40 seconds or so, and then I'm just going to let it run in the background and we can discuss it.
Okay.
Okay. But basically what happened is February 2026, and basically as an event, what they decided to do in Iran, so this is pre-war because the war is February 28th, they make a giant effigy to Baal, and then they have a crowd thing where they're going to burn it in public.
Okay.
Just so the people really know who their enemy is. Like their enemy is not Jesus Christ. It's not a rabbi. It's the servants of Baal who are coming to murder their 8-year-olds at the. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so and you could tell that the way it's filmed that they had a professional crew come out.
Okay.
You know, but they've done this multiple times. This is not the first time. So I want you to note the Star of David on the forehead, the Star of Remphan. You know,
yep.
You got the pentagon on the back. You got the Israeli flag in front of it. Let's just go to it and check it out. This will be 5th reference below, I believe. Okay, so what do you think about this?
That's amazing that they do that just as a public demonstration. It's just the government's building this?
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing they're so informed.
They're so informed,
No,
right?
they're not.
And when you see this, you're like, "What are they doing here?" You're like, "This is insanity." No, they know the things.
Okay.
Like they could be doing this podcast.
Right.
You know what I mean? They
Yeah,
could
yeah.
be telling you about the terrible things going on.
Yeah. That's incredible. Well, yeah, when you first sent me this link, I thought it was just like either a fake thing or like, why are they building a statue of Baal? Because it's not connected to them at all. And I didn't realize what you were. That's amazing.
That was in the comments too to this, because you can go to the video. It's a Twitter link I'm giving them, you know.
Okay.
And you can go and you can look in the comments and people are like, "Yeah, Iran's really evil. Look, they built a statue of Baal."
All right. No, that without any.
Oh yeah. I want to read.
Yeah,
this.
I want to see that.
We, the monotheists of the world, by the help of God, will bring down the worshippers of Baal, the worshippers of Satan, and the arrogant oppressors.
That's great.
I mean, I don't know.
That's pretty cool.
I think it's interesting because nobody talks about this type of stuff.
Right.
But it's legitimate.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. So anything more there or no? It just kind of is what it is.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing to know about, I think. Okay. So let's go on to a different story. Okay. Go.
I was just thinking about that video. I mean, it's almost something you want to show people here who don't know anything. And if you're trying to convince them of who the chosen people are, and
right.
Go, look, everybody else knows this.
Right.
And I don't know.
Okay, so now we're going to go to a totally different topic, okay? And basically, so the oil's blockaded right now. China's getting their oil coming out of the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay.
We're not talking about Iran here. We're talking about Venezuela, okay? Because the United States has enough oil for ourselves, okay? But a lot of countries don't, like Britain, France. They don't have enough oil for themselves, so they have to source it elsewhere. And I realized that getting the oil from Venezuela was part of the Iran mission.
Oh, to make up for not getting it there.
Right.
Oh.
And so other countries didn't do a Venezuela, so they're screwed. So like
Gotcha.
Britain is screwed because they didn't do a Venezuela. But we secured the logistics beforehand. You know what I'm saying? And sure, we just wanted to get rid of Maduro, you know? But why then? Because remember, we sent our Navy down there and they were just floating for a while, and it was like we knew the buildup was coming, and then it came, and then it all shifted to the Middle East for the second part of the project.
Right. Oh, interesting.
So I just my insight is to it is that, you know, it's related. And if you look at this article, I got this article here. So this is January 14th, right after they got Maduro, and boom, Trump is immediately getting the oil.
Okay.
You know, and then from there it just keeps going. You could read the article yourself.
Wow.
I just think it's an interesting insight into that. Okay, another topic. Okay. I want to point out, this is not a left-right thing. I'm just pointing out a thing that I happen to be pointing about the left.
Oh, okay.
So the left are good at protesting.
Yeah, definitely.
And I was driving to a town the other day, and I seen a whole No Kings protest.
I saw that.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I was down. Had to go somewhere to grab.
Oh,
some
near
parts.
here?
Yeah.
Oh, I was far away.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw one. So it must have been a national event then.
Yeah, I believe so.
I don't really keep track of it. But like my point here is that like, look, okay, the no kings thing is pretty stupid.
Okay.
Though he does act more and more like a king.
Yeah.
I'm buying into it a little bit more and more. And Hegseth, you know, like I don't know if you know, but Hegseth fired like 6 generals this week, including the army chief of staff.
Wow.
Because apparently they're not doing, just what you can infer from it is they don't want to do what they're saying to do.
Oh.
You know, they don't want what the regime, our regime is telling them to do. And it's interesting that they fired the army chief of staff because what involvement does the army have in Iran?
Oh, it would just be an invasion.
Right, because we're talking that he could fire somebody from the Navy, from the Air Force. The Marines are prepping, but we're talking you fire the Army Chief of Staff.
Right.
That gives you an indicator, not for sure, just an indicator.
Yeah.
But my point here, about the No Kings protest, is that Trump he started a war against Iran on behalf of Israel. You know, and you know how the left is like pro like Palestine stuff like that. They're not protesting the war.
Oh.
And so my point here is how completely contrived the protests are. There is somebody up top telling the left or the organizations that fund these things or the organizations that put these things together. And they're telling them, hey, this is the topic we're protesting.
Right.
Women's rights, no kings, forget the war.
Yeah, interesting.
Oh, well, you guys suck on the left. You suck. Because the more wrong Trump gets, the more right the left gets on issues.
Totally.
You know? And I look at him like, okay, and you guys got this? You going to do the no war? Oh, you're not. You suck. You know what I mean? I just want to point out how.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
Yeah. And if they do shift, maybe they just don't have leaders who aren't just establishment people.
Oh, just everyone's entrenched.
Yeah, because if I was on the left, say I had been to the last 3 No Kings protests, I'm bringing anti-war signs to the No Kings. No king can start a war by himself or something, but it would be war related, my sign, you know? And I just don't see that.
But I mean, maybe not the same on the right, but how we, first term, Trump was so anti-war and MAGA was on board and all that, and now he's switched and they don't protest that. I guess they don't protest a lot anyway.
Right, so I don't expect the right to protest much.
Gotcha.
You know? Severe infringement of constitutional rights, maybe, but it's more from an individualistic standpoint that we see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But as a group, the people on the right suck at protesting.
It's true.
Which, I mean, I'm all for protests. You know, I would totally go, to an anti-war protest. Even with the left, I would go, I guess. I'd take my kids.
As long as that was the only thing.
Yeah, if that's what we're doing. Yeah. And then if there's half of it's going to be trans flags, then I'm out.
Yeah.
And it probably would. There's
a chance.
There's a chance. Okay, so those are the topics I got. They're all relevant to recent time stuff.
Yeah, very relevant.
Okay, so we're done with this episode. Okay. And on Thursday, we're going to talk about the oil embargo to Cuba. I have some really good insights on that. And it should really be a top story. And I had it in this show, but then I found out so much interesting stuff about it. I'm like, I got to, because you know how we separate the other shows so they can look them up in the past? It's got so much value there.
Okay.
That we're going to talk about that Thursday.
Sounds great.
Hope to see you guys there.